The day he left is still burned into my memory. There was no fight, no warning, just a cold note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. Don't look for me. Beside the note, the key to our home, he walked out of our lives with another woman. His new future while leaving me drowning in a past I didn't choose. When the debt collectors started calling, I learned the truth. He had taken credit cards in my name, maxed them out for weekends with her, gifts, and trips. And then he disappeared, leaving $20,000 of debt in my lap. I remember crying on the bathroom floor, holding my knees like a child, wondering how I'd ever survive. My son, only 10 years old, knocked on the door. "Mom," his voice was soft. I wiped my tears quickly, but he saw them anyway. He sat beside me, his little arms wrapping around my shoulders. "We don't need him, Mom. We have each other." That single sentence pierced my heart and stitched it back together at the same time. I thought I had lost everything, but my son reminded me. I still had the most important reason to fight. Chapter 2, Picking Up the Pieces. Life after betrayal is like standing in the ruins of a home after a fire. Everything feels destroyed. The bills piled higher every week. Collectors called until my phone felt like an enemy. Sometimes I would go to bed hungry just to make sure my son's plate was full. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered his words, "We have each other." I took whatever jobs I could, cleaning houses, waitressing, even babysitting. At night, when he slept, I tried to learn new skills online: graphic design, handmade jewelry, freelance writing. Slowly, I started selling small items. There were nights I would cry silently, so he wouldn't hear. But there were also mornings when I woke up with fresh determination. My pain was no longer a prison, it was fuel. My son became my biggest cheerleader. He would leave me little notes: "You're the best mom ever," or "We're going to be okay." His love gave me a strength no betrayal could ever destroy. Chapter 3, Rising from the Ashes. 3 years later, something amazing happened. The debt was gone, every last dollar paid off. My small jewelry business had grown into a proper brand, an online store that people loved. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of fear on my chest. My son, now a teenager, looked at me with pride in his eyes. He once told me, "You're my superhero, Mom." And in that moment, I realized the truth. Betrayal had not broken me. It had forged me into something stronger. While my life blossomed, my ex-husband's life with his girlfriend began to fall apart. Friends told me they fought constantly, that money was always an issue, that he drank too much trying to numb his failures. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if karma was real. Then I'd smile because I didn't need revenge. My life was the answer. Chapter 4, The Sweetest Revenge. One evening, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, my ex-husband stood there. Older, thinner, broken. His eyes searched my face, as if hoping to find the woman who once adored him. "I made a mistake," he said, voice trembling. "Can we try again for our son?" I felt a flicker of the old pain, but it quickly vanished. Behind me, the house was warm, filled with laughter and the life I had built without him. My son came into the hallway, taller now, his eyes fierce with loyalty. "Mom doesn't need you," he said firmly, "and neither do I. We already have a family." My ex's face crumbled. For a second, I thought he might fall to his knees, but I didn't feel pity. I felt peace. I looked at him calmly. "You left us in the ashes. We learned how to rise. Don't mistake our strength for an open door." And with that, I closed the door. The sweetest revenge wasn't slamming it shut. It was knowing I had built a life so beautiful, he no longer belonged in it. My son hugged me tightly. "See, Mom, I told you. We didn't need him." This time, my tears weren't from pain. They were from pride, because he was right. We had each other, and that was more than enough. Sparkle's end of story approx. 7-0. 0 characters sparkles. Would you like me to expand each chapter separately into 0 characters each like mini-stories, so you can use them for video parts, or keep it as one long flowing story? You said, Chapter 1. ChatGPT said, perfect, thumbs up. Let's fully expand Chapter 1, Shattered Promises, into a detailed, emotional 0 character story part. You can use this as part 1 of your video or writing series. Chapter 1, Shattered Promises. The morning started like any other. Sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor, the faint sound of cartoons drifting from the living room where my son was still in his pajamas. I brewed coffee, humming softly, believing my world was intact. But by evening, everything I thought I knew about my life had shattered. When I walked into the kitchen that night, there was no warm greeting, no husband waiting. Instead, a folded piece of paper lay on the counter beside his house keys. My heart thudded as I picked it up. The note was short, almost careless, as though I meant nothing more than a formality. I can't do this anymore. Don't look for me. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My hands trembled. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of cruel joke, but the truth hit harder than any blow. He was gone. Gone with the woman he had been secretly seeing behind my back. Gone from our marriage, gone from our son's life, gone from every promise he had once whispered to me. Days later, the betrayal grew sharper when I learned the worst of it. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Credit card companies, debt collectors, strangers demanding money I had never borrowed. My husband had taken out loans and cards in my name, buying gifts, vacations, dinners, all for her, and now with him gone, the weight of $20,000 in debt had fallen squarely on my shoulders. I remember locking myself in the bathroom that night, pressing my back against the cold wall, burying my face in my knees. Silent sobs shook my chest as I wondered how I would feed my son, how I could ever climb out of this pit. I felt worthless, abandoned, humiliated. That was when I heard a soft knock on the door. Mom. My son's voice was quiet, uncertain. I wiped my tears, but I couldn't hide them when I opened the door. He was only 10 years old, yet his eyes seemed older, full of worry. He sat down beside me on the bathroom floor and slipped his small arm around my shoulders. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just held me, like he knew words weren't enough. Then he whispered something that broke me open and stitched me back together all at once. We don't need him, Mom. We have each other. My breath caught. I looked at my boy, this child who had lost a father, but somehow still carried strength in his tiny frame. In that moment, I realized the truth. Yes, my husband had left me with nothing but pain and debt. But he had also left me with something far more powerful. A reason to fight. That night, my tears weren't only from heartbreak. They were also from the spark of determination that had just been lit inside me. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when, but I swore to myself and to my son, I would rebuild us. I would rise from these ashes, and we would never need him again. Life after he left felt like standing in the middle of a collapsed house, dust, ruins, and silence pressing in from all sides. Each morning, I woke up with the same heavy question echoing in my head. How am I going to survive this? The debt collectors didn't care about my broken heart. They didn't care that I was left with a 10-year-old child and no savings. All they wanted was payment. Their calls came at breakfast, during school pickup, even in the middle of the night. Each ring was a reminder that I was drowning in $20,000 of debt I hadn't created. I sold whatever I could, jewelry, furniture, even the wedding dress that once symbolized forever. At night, when my son was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, papers spread around me, trying to calculate how many years it would take to pay everything back if I worked 2, maybe 3 jobs. The weight was unbearable at times. I'd cry quietly, covering my mouth so he wouldn't hear, but children notice things adults try to hide. My son would leave me little notes on scraps of paper. "We'll be okay, Mom," or "You're stronger than him." Those notes became my lifeline. I took every job I could find, cleaning houses, waitressing, babysitting. Sometimes I'd come home with aching feet and raw hands, but my son would meet me at the door with a smile and a hug that made the pain fade for a while. Still, something inside me refused to settle for just survival. I couldn't let his betrayal define the rest of our lives. At night, I opened my old laptop and searched for ways to earn extra money. I watched free tutorials, learned about online selling, tried making small pieces of handmade jewelry. The first time I sold one for a few dollars, I felt a flicker of hope, like maybe I wasn't trapped forever. There were nights when exhaustion won, when I fell asleep with my head on the kitchen table. But there were also mornings when I woke up with determination burning brighter. The pain I carried was no longer just pain, it was fuel, and through it all, my son stood beside me like a tiny soldier. He didn't complain when I couldn't buy him new clothes or the toys his friends had. Instead, he would say, "Don't worry, Mom, one day we'll have everything." He didn't know it then, but those words became my silent vow. I wasn't just working for survival anymore. I was building the foundation of a future where no one, especially not the man who abandoned us, could ever break us again. 3 years passed, but if you had seen me then, you wouldn't have recognized the broken woman who once cried on a bathroom floor. The debt that once suffocated me was finally gone, paid off one hard, earned dollar at a time. Every extra shift, every sleepless night, every handmade bracelet I sold online had added up. The calls from collectors stopped. For the first time in years, silence felt like freedom instead of fear. My small jewelry business, the one I had started at the kitchen table, slowly grew into something real. Orders came in from strangers across the country, then from other countries. I learned how to package, market, and expand. What once felt like survival had become success. I bought new clothes for my son without worrying if I could pay the bills. I fixed the leaking roof we had lived under for too long, and when I tucked him into bed at night, I no longer had to lie when I said, "We're going to be okay," because we already were. My son, now 13, had grown taller, stronger, and wiser. One evening, as I was packaging orders, he looked at me and said, "You're my superhero, Mom." Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness but from pride. In his heart, I had become both mother and father, both nurturer and protector. I wasn't just surviving for him anymore. I was thriving because of him. And somewhere along the way, I realized something powerful. My ex-husband's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had forged me. Every cruel debt notice, every night of hunger, every single tear had turned into the fire that shaped a stronger, braver version of myself. While my life rose, his seemed to crumble. Friends whispered stories of him fighting with the woman he left me for, struggling with jobs, wasting money, drowning in his own mistakes. I didn't ask for updates, but somehow they always found me, like little reminders from fate. There was a time I thought revenge meant making him pay, or seeing him hurt the way I hurt. But as I stood in my own home, debt-free, running a business I had built from nothing, and watching my son grow into a kind, determined young man, I realized something far sweeter. Revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about proving he could never destroy me. I had risen from the ashes, and I was only getting stronger. It was a quiet evening when the knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My son was in his room, finishing homework, while I packed orders for shipment. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door only to freeze. There he was, my ex-husband, the man who had once promised me forever and left me with nothing but debt and heartbreak. Except now, he didn't look like the man I once knew. His face was thinner, older, worn. His clothes looked tired, and his eyes carried the weight of regret. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I waited, calm, steady, while he shifted uncomfortably, trying to find the words. Finally, he whispered, "I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left. Can we try again, for our son's sake?" His voice cracked like glass. But I didn't feel pity. I felt something else, clarity. Behind me, my home glowed with warmth. The walls that had once echoed with pain were now filled with laughter, success, and love. My son had grown up in strength and kindness, without the shadow of his betrayal over us. Everything he thought he destroyed, I had rebuilt. Better, stronger. Before I could answer, my son came into the hallway, taller now, confident, no longer the small boy he abandoned. He looked his father in the eyes with a steadiness that stunned me. "Mom doesn't need you," he said firmly. "And neither do I. We already have a family." My ex's mouth opened, but no words came. His eyes glistened with shame, perhaps even tears. I could see it, the realization that he had thrown away something priceless, and he could never get it back. I stepped forward, my voice calm, steady as stone. "You left us in the ashes. We learned to rise. Don't mistake our strength for an open door." And with that, I closed the door. I didn't slam it in anger. I closed it with peace, because the sweetest revenge wasn't screaming or demanding he pay for what he had done. The sweetest revenge was standing in the life I had built without him, a life so full and beautiful that he no longer belonged in it. My son wrapped his arms around me, resting his head on my shoulder. "See, Mom, I told you. We didn't need him." This time, my tears were not from heartbreak. They were from pride, from freedom, from love. He was right, we didn't need him. We never had, we had each other, and that was more than enough.